You're listening to Morning Tattoo, Silver Assassin Book 4 by Andrea Pearson. Copyright 2019, Andrea Pearson. Dedicated to Andrea H. and Wanda Bailey. Chapter 1. The aliens sought me out immediately, seeming excited and eager to talk to me. Obviously, they had good news to give. I didn't care anymore. I had stopped the attacks on my own. Of course, that didn't mean we wouldn't have problems in the future, but I'd bought us a lot of time. We found a talisman that will help, my alien master said as Olivia and I unloaded the wagon. But you must track it, and in order to do so, you'll need a tattoo that will help you track. The one she must give you is called the Morning Tattoo. The Morning Tattoo? Olivia said, backing away. What? No. I can't give it. It's too dangerous. I glanced at her, curious. None of the others had been particularly dangerous to give or receive. Why? My mentor warned me never to give it myself. I don't know why, other than it was dangerous. You didn't ask him. I tried, but it always exhausted him to give tattoos. He was old and ailing, and he died not long after I received the morning tattoo from him. But he was very explicit about not doing it. It would be too dangerous. I turned to my alien master. That's good enough for me. Besides, we don't need the talisman anymore. I took care of our enemies myself, without help. The alien paused for a moment, half turning away, and I thought he was about to leave. Instead, he turned the rest of the way and rushed across the slave hut faster than I thought possible, antennae reaching for Olivia. He tried to grab her, strangle her, pick her up and torture her, but my protections prevented him from doing anything other than gently brushing her. A slow grin spread across my face. You can't harm her. Not while I'm alive. I realized my mistake too late. The alien spun and scurried the opposite way, yanked the other slave woman from the dirt floor, and wound his antennae around her. Before I could do anything, those antennae pulled tightly, cutting off her screams, and she slumped to the floor dead. Her eyes bulged, and blood gushed from wounds the antennae had created. I stared at her body, horrified I hadn't thought to protect her too. I will kill all of them if you do not comply right now. Okay. Olivia said, sobbing. We'll do it. Please. Just give us a minute of privacy. He needs to know what the tattoo is exactly. And how to use it, I said. She shook her head. I don't know how. I've never been able to experiment in a safe place. Olivia glared at the aliens. These tattoos carry a lot of power. I'm not comfortable learning in a location I don't control. Why is it called the Morning Tattoo? I asked. I knew it was a fair question. The golden tattoo was named after its color, gold. Nightshades were purple flowers, and the nightshade tattoo was purple. Crimson tattoo was obvious, blood and red. But morning tattoo? I was aware of the aliens leaving the room, but I refused to look at them, as they promised to return in an hour. Olivia sighed, shifting to a more comfortable position on the hard-packed dirt, and I followed suit. It's pretty silly, honestly. There's a plant called a wild morning glory that is also called bindweed. And the official name of this tattoo is bindweed tattoo. But that's not as pretty a word as morning. Bindweed? I didn't like the sound of that. Why bindweed? Because bindweed and the tattoo named after it both have to steal in order to work. Bindweed steals light and water from its hosts, the flowers and vegetables it grows on, and the morning tattoo steals from your other tattoos. My mouth popped open. These things literally were going to kill me. How am I supposed to remember all this? I could see myself mixing them up and accidentally draining myself of blood while using the morning tattoo when I really meant to stay awake for several days. You will. It'll come with time. I certainly hoped so. Okay. What do you need? Nothing. Other than the words of the spell and some water. That's insane. Why so little? I don't know, though I've always thought of it this way. The tattoo wants to be used. And it wants to be created. If the method of creating it is as simple as possible, there will be more tattoos like it in the world. She sighed and continued. Either way, using it is anything but simple. It saps everything. Not only from the rest of your tattoos, but also what those tattoos borrow. Blood, energy, sleep. That definitely isn't a small cost, so you have to be exceptionally careful while using it. Which is honestly the biggest reason why I've never really tried it. Besides, I haven't ever needed to track anything. Makes sense. Olivia nodded. Okay, I think I'm ready to give it to you. If you're ready to receive it, that is. I'm ready. She got up to grab her inkwell and needle from her side of the room before returning to take a seat next to me. She poured water in the well. Then, repeating the words of the charm, she dipped the needle into the well, extracted some of the water, and started creating the tattoo on my arm. I immediately sensed the power start flowing to me. That was new. My eyes widened, and I stared at her. Can you feel that? Feel what? I shook my head. I'm not sure. I couldn't quite put a finger on it. I'd never really felt magic before. At least not like this, and not on a regular basis. She continued constructing the tattoo, and I was glad to see that her hands were once again nimble and sure. She'd almost been destroyed by the aliens before I'd been able to get the protection tattoo. About 20 minutes later, she finished, and I gasped when I saw threads of glowing sand like smoke floating in rivulets from all of her tattoos to my new one. Little embers sparkled and swirled in the gritty smoke. I blinked when I realized something. Olivia, I can see your tattoos. Olivia startled, instinctively raising her hand to cover her arm. You can? She paled. Why? I don't know. It disturbed me, though. My heart started beating faster, and I tried not to panic as the sandy smoke rivulets continued coming faster and faster. Can you see what I'm seeing? The embers? The smoke. She shook her head. I can't see anything out of the ordinary. I described the blue stream of smoke, sand, and dust with the flecks of glowing embers in it. Did you see that when he gave you your tattoo? She shook her head, a troubled expression on her face. No. Is it because I'm magical? I'm not sure. Olivia's shoulders slumped. I'm not feeling so good. She started falling over. I reached out and caught her before she hit the floor. Olivia. I think I need to lie down. Okay. A sinking feeling hit me in the pit of my stomach, but I refused to examine it as I helped her to her corner of the slave hut, making sure she was comfortable in the blankets. You need anything? She shook her head. Just sleep. Her eyes shut, and I blinked when her breathing deepened almost immediately. Asleep already. Wow. That was fast. I got up and began pacing, panic making my heart beat faster. I was coming to realize something. Bindweed, the plant, steals from its host. Olivia was right about that. I'd known what it was the moment she started talking about it. It had been one of the most noxious weeds back on the farm. Not only did it cover and crawl up everything, but it was tight and strong and choked off more fragile plants and flowers. There was a reason this tattoo didn't require anything but water. Chapter 2. I crouched next to Olivia, my eyes starting to burn. Olivia. She stirred, her eyes slowly opening. How long after he gave you the tattoo did he die? I don't. Her eyes went out of focus. Olivia. I touched her shoulder again, but she didn't respond. Only a moment later, the light went out of her eyes and her mouth fell slack. I checked her pulse. It was gone. I couldn't believe it. How had that happened? And so quickly? She was gone just like that. Before I really had the chance to appreciate her, to enjoy her company as my only friend on that planet. Feeling as sobs formed at the back of my throat, I closed her eyes before pulling her close. She was my final link to home, to Earth. Someone who understood me, taught me, guided me. And she was gone. Forever, without me even being able to say goodbye. My emotions raged with each other, anger and sorrow. The urge to destroy something had me shaking, but the need to cry made my eyes burn. Rather than give in to the sorrow, I allowed the anger to take over. Jumping to my feet, I ran from the slave hut and rushed down the hall into my master's quarters. I strode across the room, prepared to rip the tentacles from the disgusting beast's head. Before I could do anything, though, one of those tentacles reached out and grabbed me around the neck. The contact made me freeze, and I sensed as the alien gained control of my body, just like it had when it forced me to walk through the tunnel from my high school. I was powerless to do anything, to fight, to struggle. You knew it would kill her. I shrieked, grateful I still had control over my mouth. Of course we did. It was her only purpose for existing. No, it wasn't. The alien chuckled. You have yourself to thank for it. We did it for you. To create the perfect weapon. Me? Did he really think I could be controlled that easily? That I'd actually help him? I promise you here and now. The moment I get the chance, I will destroy you. The alien laughed. We've had other slaves vow the same thing. You know it's impossible to harm one of us. Your weak bodies allow us control the moment we come in contact with you. And besides, how can you possibly kill us when you can't even access your magic? I felt my face redden. He was right. I was powerless against him. As if that wasn't enough, he said, I'm always aware of where you are as a privilege of being your owner. You can't sneak up on me, you can't surprise me. He laughed again. It doesn't matter how much you wish to kill me. It won't happen. My blood boiled, but I forced myself to see reason. He was right. I swore things wouldn't always be that way. Why do you want this talisman so much? I asked. What could possibly be worth Olivia's life? It'll completely hide our compound, freeing you for other tasks. I glared. Which only benefits you. Of course. The tentacle released me, and I slumped to the floor, my energy sapped but my anger lingering. Still, I saw reason. Having freedom for other tasks would mean freedom for my own goals. Like finding a way to kill these beasts and escape the compound. Because with Olivia gone, nothing held me there any longer. No loyalties to friends or acquaintances. Where is the talisman? That is for you to discover. There is evidence of it in the marketplace. You'll need to track it from there. I don't even know how to use the morning tattoo. Figure it out. One of the alien's tentacles pointed to a shelf on the other side of the room. You'll find an illustration of the talisman there. Take it. It'll help you trace the item once you get to the marketplace. I got to my feet and picked up the illustration. It showed an intricately designed piece of metal with bars curling in and out around each other. My mom would have found it very pretty. Folding the illustration, I tucked it in my back pocket and left the room, not bothering with farewells. As I walked back to my quarters, I formulated a plan. I'd find the talisman and use it to hide myself. To escape and never come back. Sorrow hit me square in the chest when I saw Olivia and the woman's bodies. I couldn't believe they were gone. Especially Olivia. I swallowed, shaking my head, allowing myself a moment of grief. And then I got to work, digging a grave for her near a thicket of scrub oak that overlooked the compound. I buried her facing the opposite direction, the way we'd come when we'd first arrived. I marked her grave by putting a circle of stones and bricks, like the tattoos, on top of it, pressing them deep into the dirt so only I'd be able to find it. The other woman's burial was shorter and less memorable. By that point, I was spent, and needed to get her buried quickly so I could rest. Once finished, I returned to the slave quarters and took the opportunity to inspect and clean my new tattoo. No sense letting the wound get infected from who knew what. I blinked. It had already healed. How was that possible? Did Olivia's death, her contribution to the tattoos, heal it as soon as she died. Was that part of the magic? If so, I appreciated it. I'd be able to find the talisman as soon as possible and get away from the compound. To put all of this behind me once and for all. I wasn't sure exactly how to go about learning the ins and outs of using the new tattoo. Olivia had always taught me with the others. But it made sense it would function the way they did. I decided to start by trying to track Olivia, and so I thought about her while pressing the tattoo. I was immediately overwhelmed by a thick blue haze that filled the room. Apparently, the tattoo was showing me all of the tracks she'd left in the room. It was dizzying, exhausting, overwhelming. I closed my eyes, knowing I wouldn't be able to handle something that involved just yet. Not until I learned the basics first. So I got a rock and rolled it across the floor, then pressed the tattoo on my wrist and said, "Track rock." A fuzzy blue line appeared, leading away from me. Embers glowed in the dusty smoke, and it was obvious where the rock started rolling and where it ended. And that was all the practice I needed. I set up protections in the slave hut and around the compound just in case. Little good it would do when those most important to me were already gone. The aliens had all but ignored the men, and the men still mostly ignored me. But still, it felt important to do. With teeth gritted against emotions that were distracting me, I tried to refocus. Thinking about Olivia made my eyes burn again. There wasn't anything I could do about her, though. I had to swallow my emotions. If I didn't learn to control myself, I'd make stupid mistakes. After commanding the nightshade tattoo to keep me awake, I headed to the marketplace. Chapter 3. Either I'd adjusted to how long it took me to get there, or I'd zoned out completely, because it didn't feel like it took as long as usual. A glance at my tattoo showed I'd walked the usual 2 days, though. That made me nervous, and I hoped I wouldn't ever take my tattoos for granted. The cost for using them, the entire cost, was far too great. Once I reached the marketplace, I activated my tracker tattoo and looked at the picture. Lead me to the talisman. Warmth trickled up my arm, and I knew the tattoo was going to obey. I wandered through the marketplace, looking for the dusty smoke trail I'd come to expect. But nothing showed during my first loop around the streets. And so I walked all of the roads again. Yet again, nothing showed. So I wandered again. I ended up walking the marketplace for 1 full day. I couldn't return to the compound. This was the only lead I had, and I didn't know what would happen if I returned without success. It surprised me to learn that the marketplace didn't observe regular business hours. At least, not like the ones back home. Instead, they stopped operating for about 3 hours during the night, and not at the same time. They seemed to shut down in waves here and there, leaving plenty of places open while others were closed. Different employees manned the different booths. I realized it was probably because people traveled so far to get there, and the business owners couldn't afford to shut down for the entire night. By the time the sun was rising the next morning, I'd finally decided to start asking people if they'd seen the talisman when a man caught my eye and waved me over. I approached warily, trying to get a gauge on him. As I got closer, I realized it was a severely deformed man. He had bright red eyes that protruded too far, and a nose that caved back into his face like a skeleton's, but with skin covering the holes. His mouth was extremely large and toothless. His ears were ragged and stretched out, and almost his entire skull was showing where hair should have been. I hesitated, still trying to read him. I wasn't a very short person, but he had a couple of inches on me. He peered down at me, a half smile on his face. I hid my cringe in response. Something about him said creep, but I wasn't sure if that was just my instincts or his appearance. I really hoped it wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction to how he looked. On the other hand, I also wasn't in the mood to deal with someone untrustworthy. "I know what you're searching for," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Oh. Yes. Come. I have food and water. You've been wandering the marketplace for many hours. You must be exhausted and hungry." If he was aware of how long I'd been wandering, and if he could have helped, why hadn't he stopped me earlier? Hoping I wasn't making a mistake, I followed him into a little brown hut behind a nondescript booth. "I also know who you are," he said. I couldn't help it. A little spark of excitement flared in my chest. "How?" "I've known about you for years, Abel. You're special." He knew my name. Not even my alien master had ever spoken it. I realized my mouth had popped open, and I quickly shut it. "You're obviously surprised, and I don't blame you. Allow me to tell you a little about you. You're gifted, incredibly gifted, and not just in ways you recognize. You read people, yes, but you have the ability to read them without getting emotionally involved. It allows you to remain impartial for much longer than others can. Detrimental to some, but a huge benefit to you and your situation." He continued, "You have a bright future. Many big and promising things are coming your way." My freedom? Certainly. Seeing my family again? Of course. All of this will happen. How do you know? He tapped his head, his fingers striking his skull. I tried not to cringe. They call me the Shadow Prophet. I see the past, the present, and the future. I can guide you through the mess you're in, assist you in learning more about yourself, and help you understand how, and more importantly when, to escape. Plus, who will help it happen? So I really will escape then? I asked it more as a hypothetical question, a confirmation of what he'd said earlier. Of course you will. You didn't need me to tell you that. Your desire for freedom is too strong for you to be contained the rest of your life. Your deliverance will come with assistance from someone I'll be sending your way in a few years. My heart sank. Years? I couldn't wait days, let alone years. Why can't she come now? She's not ready. And when she will be, she won't know she's being sent at all. Okay. I closed my eyes, trying to tamp down on my impatience. The knowledge that freedom was on its way, even if later than I wanted, was fantastic to receive. "You're not even curious about her?" he asked. "There are far too many other things going on right now." "Very well. Would you like more water?" I glanced at my cup, unaware I'd drained it already. And it wasn't a small cup. "Yes, thanks." He gave me more water and food. I started feeling better, my spirits rising, as I replenished myself. "Who are you?" I asked, after I'd drained another cup. "As I told you, they call me the Shadow Prophet." "Why?" "Because my prophecies involve things of a darker, more dangerous manner. They revolve around people like you." That didn't surprise me. I'd sensed something inside me snap over the past few weeks and months of being a slave. I was becoming darker as time went on, more desperate. Forced to do things I would never ever consider doing otherwise. The little ticking clock inside me reminded me I'd been sitting too long. It was time to get moving. "You said you know what I'm looking for." "Yes. A talisman that will protect the compound where you are enslaved." He actually did know what he was talking about. "Where is it?" "Come with me." He took me through a doorway, into a small room that had a trapdoor in the floor. He asked me to pull it open, which I did. Then he started first down a set of rickety steps that circled around and out of view. I followed at a slow pace. Down and around we went, into pitch blackness. I kept a hand on the railing, grateful there even was one, and my eyes on the steps below, straining to see anything in the inkiness. More than once, I felt sticky strands of web clinging to my face. I did my best to wipe them away, without losing my balance. We finally reached the bottom, and I felt hard-packed dirt underfoot. "You'll find what you need there," the Shadow Prophet said. Somehow, I could tell he was pointing to the left of us. I glanced that way, and was surprised to see the now familiar blue, dusty trail of smoke. It congregated around a hole in the tunnel wall, illuminating an empty shelf where the talisman must have been previously stored. "Good luck, Abel. I'm sure our paths will cross again." I didn't turn to look, but heard him climbing the stairs behind me. The alien hadn't said anything about the talisman being hundreds of feet underground. There was no way I would have been able to find this on my own. Had he, my master, arranged for the shadow prophet to meet me? I couldn't imagine something like that hadn't happened. But why? Why make it so difficult? Why not just tell me where to go? Another thought occurred to me. Maybe the shadow prophet had somehow erased evidence of the talisman where I'd easily find it. But what purpose would that serve? He'd admitted himself that he'd watched me walk around the marketplace for hours. Why force me to do that if he planned on introducing himself to me anyway? I had no idea who to trust or what to think. Realizing I was at an impasse, that my thoughts and feelings regarding the circumstances wouldn't change the need I had to find the talisman and use it to protect myself, I put away my concerns and questions and focused on following that trail. Chapter 4. The air was frigid this far under the surface. Maybe it wouldn't have been frigid to Abel who lived on Earth, but to current Abel, it nearly sent me into convulsions from shivers. If there'd been enough light, I was positive I'd see my breath. For all I knew, though, the temperature was in the 80s. I'd been in outrageously high temps for months at that point. Anything under 100 degrees would have been very cold. After the temperature, I noticed immediately how humid it was. Despite the coolness of the air, my hair soon stuck to my forehead, and I felt water trickling down my back. Totally pleasant. As I walked, I ran through more cobwebs. What were these spiders living off of? There couldn't have been many bugs down there. Still, I continued following the dusty smoke. I kept a hand on the tunnel wall to maintain my balance, watching the smoke to make sure I didn't lose sight of it. The little glowing embers illuminated my path, and I felt more sure-footed than I had on the stairs. Eventually, I noticed as the trail started uphill. It was gradual at first, then became steeper and steeper until I was out of breath from a hike I hadn't expected to take. Light shone through cracks in what turned out to be a door at the end. I tugged on that door, and with a great creaking it swung inward. I stepped out into a little shelter in the side of a hill. The smoke led around the corner of the hill, and I followed, pausing at the scene that opened up in front of me. I was now on the far side of the basin that housed the marketplace. I could see the road that led back to my compound opposite from me. The marketplace was busy, people bustling around in and out. It occurred to me then that I hadn't ever seen others traveling the road from my compound to the marketplace. Why was that? Where did they come from? Were there other underground passageways that brought people into town? Realizing I was wasting time, I followed the dusty smoke as it trailed along the road that led the rest of the way out of the basin to the top of the ridge. I saw that the blue smoke headed far off into the distance, as far as I could see. Exhaustion rolled over me in waves. If I followed on foot, I'd never make it. It could take days. I definitely needed a better way to travel. And so, unsure of what else to do, I turned around and headed into the marketplace to find the shadow prophet. I wasn't positive of what I'd do once I found him. Thank him. Pay him. Ask for help. He wasn't where I'd first talked to him, and I didn't dare go behind the booth into the hut. At least, not without permission. And I knew better than to draw attention to myself by calling out for him. And so, I walked to the merchant who sold things for humans and bought food and a backpack, since I didn't have the wagon, before heading home. I really hated that I was familiar enough with the compound to call it home. That was one good thing about this most recent adventure, and meeting the shadow prophet though. I'd been given hope that the compound wouldn't always be home. Chapter 5. The moment I stepped into the compound, I returned to the slave hut and set up protections around me before commanding my nightshade tattoo to allow me to sleep for the full 7 days. When I awakened, I confronted my alien master and demanded he give me a better way to travel. I can't possibly find the talisman if I go on foot, I said. It already takes 2 full days to walk to the marketplace. And the road on the other side went on for a very long time, at least 2 days' worth. If I go on foot, I won't make it back with the talisman. You'll lose me and the thing you sent me to get. An idea occurred to me. Could you get rid of the spell that holds me here? Just for this trip? Absolutely not. It was worth a shot. Then give me a better way to travel. He didn't respond for several minutes, and I forced myself to wait patiently, to hold my tongue, to not show my irritation. Finally, he said, "Go to the main building. There's a small storage room to the left of the entrance. That room contains many human inventions. Perhaps what you need will be there." I rolled my eyes. His tone of voice said I'd find exactly what I needed there. Why couldn't he just come right out and say it? It only took me a couple of minutes to reach the storage room, and I was surprised at just how many things it contained. All sorts of human contraptions, appliances, cookware, furniture, clothing, even entertainment equipment like skis and basketballs. Most importantly, there was a motorcycle. I shook my head, examining it. If only I'd had this weeks earlier. So much time would have been saved from pointless walking back and forth. I would have avoided the stupid fight in the middle of the road completely. They never would have caught up to me. I wheeled it out of the storage room, then decided to continue exploring the treasures. I wasn't surprised, just further irritated to find several cans of gas. After making sure the tank on the bike was full, I rested my palms on the handles, closing my eyes. It almost felt like freedom. I'd only driven a motorcycle once, but there was no way I'd let that hold me back. I revved it up and rode around the compound for several minutes until I remembered the gears and how to shift. And then I stocked up on gas, strapping it to one of the bike's saddlebags before heading out. With the Nightshade Tattoo's help, I made it to the marketplace in 10 hours. 10 hours. I couldn't believe how quickly I got there. And I hadn't even driven very fast. Why hadn't they given me the bike a long time ago? I would have been able to get so much more accomplished, and in a lot less time. It would have been in both our interests. Stupid aliens. Not knowing how long I'd have to follow the trail, I headed to the usual merchant to replenish my food and water stores. "Is that everything?" he asked. "No. Do you have any guns?" He raised an eyebrow, staring at me. "Why do you want a gun? They're ineffective against your aliens." "It's not the aliens I'm worried about." He didn't break eye contact for a full minute. And then he said, "Yes. You're lucky. I just traded for it only 20 minutes before you got here." He glanced up and down the street, then beckoned me to follow. We stepped into the back of his booth where he opened a trunk, shifted things in it around for a moment, then produced a small black handgun. He gave it to me. It was a car, a brand I'd never used before. I checked the magazine, disappointed to only find 7 bullets left. Hopefully, they'd be enough. Hopefully, I wouldn't need to use the gun at all. But I'd been learning not to ignore my instincts, and my instincts were screaming at me to find a method of self-defense that didn't involve fists. I couldn't wait until I had the talisman, and could use it to hide me and the gun. If I could figure out a way to undo the spell. I'd been mulling that over for a while. How would I escape, even with the talisman, if I still had the spell on me? I hadn't thought that part of my plan through very carefully. Maybe I'd been hoping the talisman would hide me from even magic. And maybe it would. I couldn't hold out on that hope, though. It would crush me if it didn't pan out. "How much?" I asked. The merchant nodded, obviously sensing my desire to keep knowledge of the gun away from my masters. It might be ineffective against them, and I totally understood that, but that didn't mean I wanted them to know about it. "You could work it off," the merchant said. "I need an assistant to help organize inventory. If you spent 2 or 3 hours here every time you came, your owners wouldn't ever know." "That would be fine." "How many hours would you require?" 300. He said it without batting an eye. It made me hesitate, though. I didn't need to ask him to know that guns were incredibly rare. But I was a man of my word. My parents had worked hard to instill integrity in their children. If I agreed to the exchange, I'd be stuck on that planet for at least a year, probably 2. Just thinking that made my mouth go dry. With my instincts telling me I needed a gun, though, I knew I'd go through with the agreement. I still preferred life over death. But it hurt so much to think of that much time getting lost. "I'll do it," I said. We shook hands. I didn't fail to notice the relief on the man's face, and I couldn't help but wonder why he hadn't sought out help earlier. He obviously needed it. He produced a belt and holster, and I carefully tucked the gun out of sight, relishing the feel of it pressing against my skin. I hadn't noticed how much the stress and worry over my inability to fully defend myself had built up until just then. Relief washed over me in waves, making me feel so light I wouldn't have been surprised if I floated away. I'd definitely be keeping the gun with me at all times. Backpack ready, gun loaded, and spirits soaring, I set out toward the far side of the marketplace where I'd last followed the trail. Once I started tracking again, I kept an eye on my tattoos, knowing the morning one was stealing from the others. I'd need to be careful not to overdo it. Following the dusty smoke trail, I drove for 2.5 days straight, stopping to fill the tank twice. Not once did I overtake anyone. Seriously, were people teleporting their goods back and forth? Boy, I'd be seriously mad if I found out the aliens could do that. Toward the end of the second day, when the flat terrain had given way to gently rolling hills dotted with scrub oak, the outline of a massive compound appeared on the horizon. It was huge, like a stone fortress with high walls and a huge gate. As I neared the compound and started slowing down, I was surprised to see the talisman in plain sight on top of the gate. I knew what it was immediately. The thing was unmistakable. The trail led there, and the magical device was practically glowing. Why the crap would its owners leave something so valuable, if it was indeed valuable, out where anyone could see it? It didn't take long to figure out the answer to that question. The tracker tattoo allowed me to see the talisman. They were using it to hide their compound, and if I weren't magically tracking it, I wouldn't have been able to see it. I slowed the bike to a crawl, feeling his eyes turn to me. My heart rate shot up, and I did my best to act casually. Had I already given myself away? I'd been staring intently at the talisman. Had they noticed? Hoping they hadn't, and knowing how important it was that I act nonchalant, I stopped the bike completely and stared at the gate, trying to make it look like I was confused, like I was seeing through the gate to the other side. Slowly, still putting on a disoriented air, I got off the bike and wheeled it around. Then I headed back the way I'd come, trying to formulate a plan. I drove the bike around the first large hill I came to, before pulling off the road, out of sight of the compound, hiding in the nearest shrubberies. And then I waited for a full hour for someone to come after me. No one did. I relaxed, pulling a thin blanket from the backpack and lying on it, munching on cheese as I stared up through the branches at the reddish-brown clouds that constantly covered the sky. After filling the bike's tank with gas and my stomach with cheese, bread, and jerky, I stopped the tracker tattoo and commanded my nightshade tattoo to allow me to sleep until nighttime. Chapter 6. I woke up once the sun had gone down, and everything was dark. I was totally alert, my spirits high in anticipation of the adventure awaiting me. Getting the talisman would be difficult, but escape would be easy. All I had to do was have the talisman hide me. I packed up my things, leaving everything in the scrub oak except for the gun, and circled the hill in the opposite direction from the road, heading toward the compound on foot. Too bad I didn't have a tattoo for hiding. I had one for energy, one for sleep, one for protection, and one for tracking, but nothing that would help me blend into my surroundings. I felt exposed. I knew there weren't eyes on me. Nothing was out there since I hadn't yet cleared the hill, but knowing that didn't help. My skin still crawled. It only took 10 minutes to walk around the hill. It wasn't very big. I paused once I had, examining the landscape. There wasn't anything to hide in or under. Everything was totally exposed between where I stood and the gate that housed the talisman. What was I supposed to do? Make a run for it? Army crawl? slowly walk forward in a daze, acting like I had no idea what I was doing. I opted for none of those options, instead striding across the space between the hill and the wall. Nothing happened. No one shouted at me, no alert went up, no one even noticed. I leaned against the stone wall in relief, resting my forehead on the cool surface. Once I'd caught my breath, I headed toward the gate. Again, no one saw or called out. With a shrug, I climbed the fence, looping my arm through the bars for support when I got to the talisman. I glanced around. Still, no one was watching. If this magical item was so carelessly protected, they deserved to have it stolen. It took some prying, but I got it off, then quickly started climbing back down. I'd nearly reached the ground when someone finally noticed me. "Hey," a man shouted. English. It was nice to hear my language from someone other than Olivia. My heart clenched, and I pushed thoughts of her aside. Alarm calls went up everywhere behind me as I dropped to the dirt. Time to get the talisman to help out, especially since there was absolutely nowhere to take cover. "Hide me," I whispered, doing my best to concentrate through the cacophony as I ran. Nothing happened. "Protect me." How did this thing work? Still nothing. I heard a gun fire, and dirt exploded next to me. Crap. That was really close. I pressed my adrenaline tattoo and ran as fast as I could, grateful for the warmth and energy that flooded my tired and stiff limbs. More guns went off, their bullets pinging the dirt all around me. Then something big exploded on the ground to my right, pelting me with sand and rocks, the shockwave nearly knocking me over. Bombs. Great. I pushed myself harder, doing my best to zigzag in an unexpected pattern so the gunners wouldn't have an easy target. Halfway to the hill, and somewhere around the time when my adrenaline wore off, the explosions stopped. No way had they given up. They knew I had the talisman. They'd do everything in their power to retrieve something so big, so important. A motorcycle roared behind me. Then another. They'd obviously given up on shooting me down. No time to celebrate, because I was about to lose my head start. Two riders caught up with me just before I reached my own bike. I pulled out my gun, dove into the shrubbery, and trained it on them. Thank goodness I'd followed my instincts and got the gun. I wouldn't have been able to outride them. Especially since they obviously were more experienced riders than I was. Pop, pop. I missed both times, regrouped, and fired again. Pop, pop, pop. That time I hit them and they crashed. I didn't take the time to check, not even visually, to see if they were dead. Grabbing my backpack and slinging it over my shoulders, I hopped on the motorcycle and peeled out, spraying dirt and rocks everywhere. The explosions started up again, surprising me with how close they landed. How long before I was out of reach? Now that I was on the motorcycle and not running for my life, I clenched the talisman against the handlebar as I drove, trying to figure out how to get the stupid thing to function properly. Nothing I tried worked. I put thoughts, emotions, commands, everything to it, and still it didn't hide me. More vehicles roared behind me, their engines audible over the sound of my motorcycle, and I tucked the talisman away before putting on more speed. Trusting that my nightshade tattoo would keep me awake, I drove straight through the night, hoping my pursuers would take a break. They didn't. A quick glance behind me the next morning let me know they were in jeeps. I now knew the talisman was important to them, but the fact that they were trading off driving while chasing showed just how desperate they were to get the thing back. A thought sobered me. How many of them would get killed for losing it in the first place? My gas tank was nearly empty when the jeep sputtered to a stop behind me. I continued for another few miles before stopping to fill my own tank. This happened a couple more times, and each time they ran out of gas, I filled the bike's tank, regardless of how full it still was. The jeeps nearly caught up to me by the time I reached the marketplace. Just as I dipped down into the basin, I heard bullets whizzing past me. Crap. Way too close. I pushed the bike as hard as I dared, knowing I was about to enter the marketplace at incredibly reckless speeds. Get out of the way, I shouted. People dove to the sides just in time. I took the first right, then my second left, slowing down as I drove, weaving in and out of alleys and streets. Their bigger vehicles couldn't keep up in the crowds, and I lost them fairly quickly. My relief was brief. I only had a day left on my nightshade tattoo. I wasn't going to waste any of it. It was too precious. No way did I want to risk getting caught and falling asleep for 2 full days as my body attempted to take me home while my pursuers tortured, robbed, and killed me. Never mind the fact that I just robbed them. Boy, I wasn't making any friends here. And so I headed toward home. Once I cleared the crowds, I revved the bike's engine, then peeled the rest of the way out of the marketplace. I headed up the side of the basin where I took a quick break out of sight of the marketplace to fill up on gas, relieve myself, and drink and eat. And then I started riding again. By the time the compound was in view, the jeeps were not far behind. If it weren't for the fact that they kept having to stop for gas, I would never have maintained my head start. As it was, being 4-wheel drive, they were able to drive faster than the little bike I rode, and they kept catching up with me. As I neared the compound, I was surprised to see my master and several other aliens rushing toward the gate. They were accompanied by a woman I'd never seen before. I peeled through the gate, jumping from the bike before it had even stopped moving. I didn't need to hear my alien master screaming at me to hand the talisman to the woman. I was already racing toward her. "Here," I shouted, shoving it at her. "Activate it," my alien master said to her. The jeeps were only 30 feet away. "I don't know how," the woman said. 20 feet until the jeeps reached us. I expected the aliens to destroy her at that, but my master said, "Tell it to hide the compound." She nodded, bringing the talisman up to eye level. "Hide the compound." The jeeps skidded to a stop only 10 feet from where we stood, just behind the gate. The woman, aliens, and I froze, watching the drivers as they hopped out and approached on foot. "Crap, we're too late," one of the men said. "They've activated it already." "They were standing right there," a woman said. "Why can't I see them anymore?" "Because he got the talisman," said the man. "It's obviously working." "Well, what are we waiting for?" she asked. "Let's go destroy them." "Destroy who?" a second man asked. The others didn't respond. I held my breath as they squinted, staring in our direction. The woman started. The men shuffled, confused, then they all started talking at once. It was important, very important. "He's going to punish us." "For what? What have we done that was wrong?" "We left the compound. He didn't give us permission to leave. We'd better head back." "I think you're right." The group who'd spent the last 4 days chasing me continued mumbling to each other as they turned and walked back toward their jeeps. I breathed a sigh of relief. My alien master turned to the woman. "Thank you for your services. You are no longer needed." One of his antennae flipped out, and before I could do anything, stabbed her in the eye, the tentacle burying deep. She crumpled to the ground. Horrified, I stared down at her. Why'd you do that? Was she dead?" "She had to be. She was the last Arete on this planet who could control the talisman. We took care of the rest while you were gone." He motioned to me. "You will hide it in the compound. It is your duty to make sure no one finds it ever." I clenched my jaw, realization dawning on me. I couldn't run away. The talisman didn't work for me, and the last person who could command it was dead. There was no escape. This really was my home now. I swallowed, struggling against the crippling despair that made my eyes smart. But then hope flared inside me. The Shadow Prophet. He'd promised me. He'd promised I'd have my freedom again. And I refused to give up on that hope. Epilogue. Years later. A blonde woman approached. I felt her coming, my tattoo alerting me to her presence, but the thick mental fog that was now a constant companion prevented me from reacting until she was gone again. Nothing happened while she was there, so I decided it wasn't important. My master would probably punish me later for not mentioning it, when he searched my mind and found the information there. I no longer cared. I couldn't think past my aching hunger. The shadow prophet was giddy with excitement, though, when I mentioned her to him. "She's the key, Abel. She'll bring her to you." My heart rate rose when I realized what he was talking about. Or more precisely, who? Elizabeth. The one with the red curls. The one I was destined to be with forever. The one who had been called to destroy immortal creatures. I'd read the prophecies about her. The shadow prophet had supplied me with them. He'd carefully instructed and helped me understand more about her over the years. He'd guided and directed me. He was the only one who truly understood my situation. I didn't know how much time passed between visits from the woman with the blonde hair, but when she returned again, I knew she was trying to take my talisman. How had she even found our compound? Despite the fact that I realized she would introduce me to Elizabeth, I couldn't allow her to achieve her objective. Olivia had died for that talisman. The aliens would destroy me if the woman took it. And so I fought her. Tried to, anyway. She was too powerful. She did things with magic I'd never seen before, and she was so fast at it. She had me pinned against a wall with a chair before I could blink. "I need your help," she hissed. "They're coming." I knew she was referring to the aliens. And she did need my help. They'd destroy her for trying to steal the talisman. But could I assist and get away with it? Which was more important, my duty to my masters or saving this woman? Memories of Olivia flooded my mind. I'd tucked them away for years, but they came now, unbidden. I'd tried to save her. And I'd failed. I wouldn't fail now. Quickly, quietly, I flung blankets and pillows from my bed. I indicated for the woman to hide, then covered her, sitting on top of the pile. I did my best to look nonchalant and bored. It wasn't difficult. I'd been so starved, so deprived of healthy interaction, that showing expression was unnatural now. My alien master rushed into the room. "Where is she?" I took my time responding, my head slowly turning in his direction. "Who?" He growled in frustration before spinning and leaving. He hadn't even searched my mind. I counted to 30 before moving, and the blonde woman waited a while longer, then exited her hiding spot. She thanked me and exited the room. I sensed it when she and her powerful companions left the planet completely. Disappointment leaked into my exhausted mind. Why hadn't Elizabeth come? When I told the shadow prophet what had happened, he urged me to be patient, promised she would still come. And he was right. When the blonde woman returned, she brought Elizabeth. The shadow prophet had spoken of her wonderful qualities and traits, of her happy and bright personality, her compassion and charity. Not once did he mention her beauty. Elizabeth, my Elizabeth, was stunning. And not just outside, but inside as well. She was kind and caring, charitable and positive. She lifted up those around her, made them feel good about themselves. She was my superior in every way. And when her friend invited me to leave with them, I was ready. I was ready for hope, for the chance to survive on my own, for food, definitely for food. But most importantly, I was ready for freedom. The end. This has been Morning Tattoo, Silver Assassin Book 4 by Andrea Pearson. Thank you for listening. Would you like to gain access to exclusive audiobooks only available to members of Andrea's Readers Group? Click the link in the description to learn more.